Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 521. I had the white pieces. I played e4, my opponent played e5. And we go for the main line here, knight f3 attacking the pawn, knight c6 defending it, and bishop b5, the Ruy Lopez, and the most common of all the e4, e5 openings. So my opponent plays a somewhat rare defense, d6, the old Steinitz defense. The modern Steinitz, or the Steinitz deferred, is to play a6 first and then play d6. That maybe is a little better. D6 can be played. It's just a little bit, well, it leads to kind of a cramped position similar to a Philidor defense. So I immediately challenge the center with d4. That's the main move here. Taking advantage of the pin on the knight and even threatening to push on with d5. So it helps to unpin immediately. And so that's the normal main line here. I'll go ahead and show the main line instead of what he played, which is a big mistake. So the main line is bishop d7 here. If we back up, I'll show it to you. In the opening book, bishop d7 is the top choice. You could also take on d4. It's another way of dealing with this threat of pushing the pawn. But bishop d7 makes sense, breaking the pin and indirectly defending the e-pawn. If you try and win this pawn here, for example, by taking and exchanging the knight, black gets a counterattack on your e-pawn. So this doesn't actually win a pawn, which you might think it does if you haven't seen this position before. So black is fine here. Black is just equal. There might even be a queen trade, which would help black, bringing his rook to the center. So that's nothing to be afraid of. But after, let's go back to the game. After bishop d7, instead of trying to take, you just keep developing. Knight to c3. And you've got more space here. And there's still this kind of pressure on the center. But, well, black can develop too, put some counter pressure, and get this kind of position. Bishop e7. So you see black has this very cramped setup. And at some point you may want to exchange out here or push the pawn forward. Gain a little more space. There are different ways to proceed from this point, but well, black has a comfortable, white has a comfortable edge in this position, and but it's still playable for black. So that's the way this opening could be played. But after d4, my opponent played the move d5, and we're right out of the opening book, and this is just a terrible move. It gives up a pawn immediately, and he's also under a lot of pressure, so it's a pawn and a bad position. So that's not good when that happens, because I can just grab that pawn and then I'm immediately putting more pressure on the pinned knight. He defends it with knight ge7, and then I bring my queen out to f3 rather, to put pressure here. It's interesting that queen h5 is even stronger, because I guess you're hitting the same target, but along a diagonal. Anyway. This is not a bad move, but it allows f6 here, which defends from the front and kicks the knight, which wouldn't be possible if the queen were on h5, because that pawn would be pinned. So anyway, this is still good. He goes bishop e6, defending. Didn't find the f6 move, but this is a reasonable defense here, just considering he was in an awful position to start with. So I just keep developing knight c3, more pressure on the center. Goes a6. Forcing me to decide what to do with the bishop, and I decide well, it's best just to trade out. I'm up material, and I'm going to win more material after this, it looks like. Although he should take back with the pawn and try and hold on to the center as long as possible. So the best play for black would be pawn takes, and then I guess I could castle. I was thinking maybe I would grab that pawn, but just castling and maintaining the tension looks good for white. I've still got more space in the center. I have an extra pawn. And his bishop isn't looking too great. Yeah, maybe that's why there's no hurry to trade here, because his bishop isn't doing a whole lot. And if he trades, yeah, d takes e4 is an idea, but I take back with a knight and get another piece, and it leaves him with doubled pawns here that are isolated. So all this is good for for white, but it's better than what he played, which is knight takes, and that gives me another pawn. And I'm forking these two pieces. So he escapes the fork by taking my knight. But now I have this really strong pawn duo in the center, and he saves his bishop. So he doesn't go down any pieces, but he's down two pawns, and they're really monster pawns here in the center. So the rest of the game is kind of a demonstration of how dominating a pair of pawns in the center can be. there's just not a whole lot that black can do. His only hope, I guess, is to try and undermine those pawns in some way, try and prove they are pushed, they've been overextended. But that's not easy to prove because my development is fine. I haven't suffered any compromises in my development in order to get those pawns. So all this is good for white. He develops his bishop. I develop my bishop. He decides to castle. Good choice. Get out of the center and maybe get some rooks on these guys. I wanted to force his bishop over here to make a decision. I want to get rid of that bishop really because I want to be able to put my rooks in the center without creating a pin on my knight. So he takes, and I take back with the queen, so I think that helped me, makes it easier for me to get my rooks to the center. Now he goes c6, so that's the idea, going after these pawns and trying to undermine them. And I have to decide here whether I want to defend the pawn or push it. If I defend, I assume he's going to trade, and then I've lost that strong pawn duo. So I decide to push, although the downside is that now he can effectively blockade those pawns. So it'll take me a few moves to break the blockade, but I do eventually manage. So anyway, this after bishop e6, I get my rooks to the center, rook to d1, rook to c8, defending the c pawn so he can push his b pawn and c pawn forward on the queen side. I drop my bishop back to c1. Now the engine doesn't think that's best. It's interesting that the engine just wants to keep playing with the pieces, rook to d3, or pushing on the queen side, a4, to slow down his queenside pawns. But there's nothing wrong with a more direct approach here. Just get the bishop out of the way so I can push my f-pawn forward and get these guys going again. He goes b5, go f4, he goes c5, and I go f5. So natural consequence. And now he's got to get his bishop out of the way. He goes to c4, and I get my rook on the e file, which is where I want it anyway because I'm going to push the e pawn forward next. Let's see, he goes a5, pushing on the queen side, and I push forward with e6. So now we get this trade, and I've managed to move my pawn duo another step forward, so inching closer to the goal line. And they're just really dangerous at this stage. They're pretty much unstoppable. A pair of pawns on the 6th rank like this is stronger than a rook. In general. So you know, a lot of players would be willing to sacrifice a rook to get a position like this, and here I just have it for free. So anyway, he pushes on with b4. I take, takes back, and then I cancel. He took back with the c pawn, maybe hoping for some play with the outside pawn. Anyway, I go with queen over to the other side of the board, but keeping an eye on my central pawns here, and also taking a look at the king. Preparing bishop to h6. He goes queen to f6. This actually is a little bit of counterplay. This keeps both my rooks tied down. If I only had one rook here, then he would be threatening mate, but with two rooks, it's adequately defended. So I have time to push my e-pawn forward and also disrupt his coordination. Now, if he moves his rook forward, trying to keep this battery going, I can just push on with d7, and I will win a rook or get a queen. So that's winning, but anything wins here, basically. If we go back to the game. Okay, so we go back to the game here. Let's back up. After e7, he played rook f to e8, and now I can push on with d7 anyway, forking the two rooks. So he went with queen b6 check, and I just moved my king to a square where it can't be checked again. He went bishop b5, hitting the pawns and trying to prevent them from queening, but well, I played d takes c8. Okay, that is the best way. I was curious. I mean, I could take either rook here, but this is a little more accurate because it pulls his rook away from the defense of the pawn, and now you have the idea of bringing this rook in with check. Which is what I played next. He has, because he moved his bishop back here, he has adequately defended the e8 square, so I can't just push the pawn forward. But rook d8 check is good enough. He takes, I take back, and he takes with the queen. So I've given up the two pawns, but I've got a rook and I also have an attack on his king. So this is still completely winning. Yeah, look at that 50 with bishop h6. So this is interesting. Right here he plays the move g6, which leads to a mate in 4 or 5. And it's an interesting exercise if you want to pause the video here, try and imagine black has played the move g6 and see if you can find the best sequence for white here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and give the answer away now. He did play g6. And the best starting move here is queen b3 check. It's a nice idea to put your queen on a diagonal opposite the color of the bishop. You just dominate these 4 squares here. Let's see, he can throw some pieces away by interposing, like with bishop c4, queen d5, but he just ran to the corner. I mean, it doesn't help. There's a forced mate here. And then the queen comes into f7. It's maybe not an easy move to see in advance, but it threatens just the immediate checkmate, and there's no good way to meet this threat. If he tries queen g8, I thought he might try this. He didn't play here. Then I was thinking rook e8 would be a good answer, pinning the queen. But an even quicker win is the move queen to f6 check. But well, let's go back to the game. Queen f7. He instead just played the move a4, allowing the immediate queen g7 mate. And so that's how the game ended. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon. Bye.